Good evening, everybody. It's good to see you tonight. We're glad that you're here and look forward to a time of Bible study. These Wednesday night classes, we've been studying the miracles of Jesus for the last several weeks. We're going to wrap up that study as far as the miracles tonight. If you're looking at your study guide, we're on lesson 13, the last one in that little booklet that we made up. We'll be looking at some of the final miracles that Jesus performed. Next week, Lord willing, what we want to do is we have said dozens of times during the course of this study, we have said dozens of times that while believing in all the miracles that Jesus did and that others did that are recorded in the Bible, we do not think that there are miracles happening in the world today. And of course, that's a point of controversy in the religious world, and we are called upon to defend our position in regards to that. So I thought next week we'll spend one more week about miracles. And next week we'll talk about why we believe that there are no miracles happening in the world today. We'll do that next week and then be ready to begin a new study thereafter. All right, so the first miracle that we want to talk about tonight is recorded in Matthew chapter 17. A short reading, Matthew chapter 17, beginning verse 24. Matthew 17, verse 24, and when they were come to Capernaum, they that received tribute money came to Peter and said, doth not your master pay tribute? And he said, yes. And when he was come to the house, Jesus prevented him, saying, what thinkest thou, Simon? Of whom do the kings of the earth take custom or tribute? Of their own children or of strangers? Peter said unto him, of strangers. Jesus said unto him, then are the children free. Notwithstanding, lest we should offend them, go thou to the sea, and cast a hook, and take up the fish that first cometh up. And when thou hast opened his mouth, thou shalt find a piece of money. Take that, and give unto them for me and thee. Okay, so the question that Peter was asked there in verse 26, does your master pay tribute? Now the question arises as to what was this tribute that he was being asked about. Do you pay tribute? Does Jesus pay tribute? Most all commentators agree, almost unanimously, not quite the ones that I studied, but most all the commentators agree that this was the temple tax. You might note, and maybe you even want to write in your margin, in Exodus chapter 30, in the law of Moses, there was instruction about this. Exodus chapter 30, verse 12, when thou takest the sum of the children of Israel after their number, then shall they give every man a ransom for his soul unto the Lord. When thou numberest them, that there be no plague among them, when thou numberest them, this they shall give every one that passeth among them that are numbered, half a shekel after the shekel of the sanctuary. A shekel is 20 gerahs. A half shekel shall be the offering of the Lord. Now obviously the temple didn't even exist at that point, but this was a tax that was given. Notice the shekel of the sanctuary, it says. And so this was a fairly insignificant. It wasn't a huge sum of money, but a fairly simple tax placed upon the children of Israel to maintain. At that time, it would have been the tabernacle. Later, it would have been the temple. Here, it was a half shekel in Exodus. It's kind of interesting that in Nehemiah, it's mentioned again, Nehemiah 10, verses 32 through 34, but there, it's a third of a shekel. So I don't know whether that was a deflation or what was going on, but Nehemiah referenced a lesser amount, again, for the maintaining of the temple. The temple tax, it came to be called the temple tax. Now, in regards to Roman taxes, that question, there was that question as well. But again, most all agree that, and it comes somewhat, the conclusion is reached somewhat because the question is asked as though this was a voluntary giving. Does your master pay tribute? So some kind of argue that the question is asked, you can or you don't have to, but does your master do it? Makes sort of lends to the the conclusion that it was the temple tax, not the Roman tax. Now we know the question of the Roman tax was a big issue too. Look at Matthew 22. In Matthew 22, verse 17, remember they came to Jesus. Matthew 22, verse 17, tell us therefore, what thinkest thou? Is it lawful to give tribute unto Caesar or not? But Jesus perceived their wickedness and said, why tempt ye me, ye hypocrites? Show me the tribute money. And they brought unto him a penny. He said unto them, whose is this image and superscription? They said unto him, Caesar's. Then said he unto them, render therefore unto Caesar the things which are Caesar's, and the things, and unto God the things that are God's. So here it's clear they're talking about Roman taxation here, right? It's actually worded somewhat different, and again that leads to the conclusion that in the text we're studying, it was about the temple tax, not the Roman tax. Look at Luke 23. In Luke 23, remember when Jesus had been taken and they were trying to come up with some charges that they could accuse him with. Luke 23:2. They began to accuse him, saying, we found this fellow perverting the nation and forbidding to give tribute to Caesar, saying that he himself is Christ the King. Well, that was an outright lie, right? Just a bald-faced lie. Jesus had never forbid his followers to pay taxes. In fact, he taught them to pay taxes to Caesar, right? So that was a lie, but of course everything about the trial of Jesus was a farce anyway. But again, having said all, Jesus taught, pay your government taxes. Just a few say that this question here in our text in Matthew 17 is about Roman tax, but almost all agree that this was almost certainly the so-called temple tax that they were asking. They asked Peter. They didn't come to Jesus. They asked Peter, does your master pay the tribute? Peter's answer was yes. And then when he came into the house where Jesus was, Jesus confronted him and said, do the kings of the earth take tribute or custom from their own children or from strangers? Would a king's son be expected to pay taxes? And Peter said, no, king's son wouldn't be expected to do that. And Jesus said, then children are free. So Jesus makes a point. Jesus makes a point sort of about his identity here, isn't he? Would it seem reasonable that the king's son would pay taxes? No, Peter says. Well, then Jesus says, well, the children are free. There shouldn't be this expectation. But notwithstanding, lest we should offend them, go. So Jesus is going to make a provision to pay this tax because he doesn't want it to be a stumbling block or an offense. There's a principle there, right? There's a biblical principle there that's worthwhile, is in that, we sometimes we do things that we wouldn't necessarily have to do, or we avoid doing some things that we could rightfully do because we don't want to cause an offense, we don't want to make an issue, we don't want to cause somebody to stumble, we don't want to make a point of contention out of something. So, Jesus did that here, and I think he sets an example for us that has broad applications. Sometimes there are things that I can do, but I choose not to because I don't want somebody to take it wrong. And vice versa. Other times there are things I should not do, but in all things I don't want to be a stumbling block or an offense to someone else. Jesus sets that example here. It's a worthy example. Any comments here? Anybody have a thought? All right. So how's he get the money for this? Well, it's a miracle, right? Go cast a hook, take up the fish that first cometh up. When thou hast opened his mouth, thou shalt find a piece of money. That take and give to them for me and thee. Fish don't... Wade, when we go fishing, have you ever found money in a fish's mouth? You know, I think we would fish more. if that was a possibility, we'd probably fish more than we do. But Jesus could tell that this, go do this, and this is what will happen, and it did. And so it's just an amazing thing. Yeah, wait.
Yeah, so Jesus' faith was never in question. I mean, everybody understood that he was a very religious man. He was a very faithful man. They had to find ways.
Yeah.
And they had to basically alter things to make.
They were fishing here, weren't they?
They were looking for Jesus. Jesus knew all along what he was going to be accused of. He knew all along what was going to take him to Pilate and what was going to put him on that cross. He knew it, and he wanted it, but he knew it in a certain way. And there were some things that he was not going to, like this.
We're not going to make a point out of it.
We're not going to make a point.
We're not going to fight this battle.
Right.
We don't have to.
But there are some things that he knew that was going to take him there.
Okay. All right. I think that's right. Josh.
Yeah, I'm not trying to open up a whole can of worms, but I was just thinking that I've heard people make the argument that this was a case of Jesus performing a miracle. Like I don't want to have to. Maybe I've got the money, maybe I don't. Spend my own money, but we'll perform this miracle. That way, I just kind of, for my own, self-interest.
So this was Jesus was doing this selfishly.
Yeah.
Using his miracle working power in a selfish fashion. I was going to ask that, by the way, and I think it's a good thing you bring up. So, most of the miracles were done and lots of people could see it. And the only person apparently who had any knowledge of this miracle was Peter. Peter had seen lots of miracles before. Why does Peter need this miracle? Well, we know Peter still has shaky faith, right? Peter's faith is still shaky. This is not wasted on him. And of course, Jesus would know that this would be recorded for our benefit too. And so it's not like a throwaway. Somebody, this is a throwaway miracle. This doesn't amount to anything. I think there's obvious value here. JD.
I think it's partly too, even outside the miracle, just another opportunity for him to, teach Peter that he is who he said he was,
yeah.
Which is what you were talking about before.
Yeah.
That, as God's son,
I shouldn't have to pay
as a king's
taxes.
son, he's not beholden to that.
Yeah, I think you're right. So again, I don't think it's a waste. I don't think it's a throwaway or wasted miracle. It serves a valuable purpose, I think. But again, most all commentators think that this tribute is the temple tax. Did you have a thought, Tom?
Things that led up to it. Peter was fishing. A lot of times you go out, you just don't throw the hook in the water. Catch a fish right away.
Yeah, and never do you find money in there. So this is a clear miracle that he could predict that this was what would be the outcome. Yeah, Timothy.
Do you think Jesus felt morally obligated to give the temple tax? Because he doesn't have a farm or he doesn't have produce, where he could tithe. So do you think he felt obligated when he doesn't have income?
Well, I don't know what he felt. It doesn't say, but apparently this was collected on a voluntary basis by the time of the first century. Again, the law of Moses said something about it. The half shekel, but though even the way it's worded here seemed like it was a voluntary kind of contribution to maintain the temple. But Jesus, either way, Jesus, I don't want this to be an issue or a stumbling block. Let's pay it. So I don't know. I don't know whether he felt a moral duty. Either way, he wanted to take it off the table. We're not going to let this be an issue.
But this is different from the tithing. This is different from Moses and the tithing.
Yes. Yeah. This wasn't tithing. This was a separate thing. Yeah. Good point. All right. Let's go to the next miracle, recorded in two places, and they're not long readings, and there's a little bit of a potential conflict that we want to explain. So let's read Matthew 21:18. Now all of this is taking place in the last week of Jesus, right? He's in Jerusalem. So or at least here in 21, he's in Jerusalem. He is in fact, in 21, he enters into Jerusalem. In the morning, as he returned to the city, he hungered, and when he saw a fig tree in the way, he came to it and found nothing thereon but leaves only, and said unto it, Let no fruit grow on thee henceforth forever. And presently the fig tree withered away. And when the disciples saw it, they marveled, saying, How soon is the fig tree withered away? Jesus answered and said to them, Verily I say unto you, if ye have faith and doubt not, ye shall not only do this which is done to the fig tree, but also if thou shalt say unto this mountain, Be thou removed and be cast into the sea, it shall be done. And all things whatsoever ye shall ask in prayer, believing, ye shall receive. Okay, hang on to that now. Let's read Mark's account, Mark 11. Mark 11, verse 12. On the morrow, when they were come from Bethany, he was hungry, and seeing a fig tree afar off, having leaves, he came, if haply he might find anything thereon. And when he came to it, he found nothing but leaves, for the time of the figs was not yet. And Jesus answered and said unto it, No man eat fruit of thee henceforth forever. And his disciples heard it. All right, now skip down to verse 20. And in the morning, so this will be the next day, in the morning they passed by, they saw the fig tree dried up from the roots. And Peter, calling to remembrance, said unto him, Master, behold, the fig tree which thou cursest is withered away. And Jesus answering said unto him, Have faith in God, for verily I say unto you, that whatsoever ye shall say unto this mountain, whosoever shall say unto this mountain, Be thou removed, and be thou cast into the sea, and shall not doubt in his heart, but shall believe that those things which he saith shall come to pass, he shall have whatsoever he asketh. All right, so Matthew's account makes it sound like he cursed the fig tree and instantaneously it withered. Mark's account clearly says he cursed it one day, and when they came by that way the next day, they saw it withered. Now, have we got a contradiction here? That's my question to you. Because, you know, there are always people who want to seize on any potential contradiction, right? But notice, so back to Matthew. Keep your finger up, Mark. Go back to Matthew's account. It says, verse 19, right at the end of verse 19, Presently the fig tree withered away, and when the disciples saw it, they marveled. Well, presently is a term, is a relative term, isn't it? You know, if I told you, you know, that something happened and somebody said something, and presently I told it to somebody else. Somebody told me that they have a sale on eggs at Walmart. And presently I told somebody else, and they went over there and they were not on sale. So how long was there between when I saw the eggs on sale at Walmart and presently somebody went and checked out the prices? How long transpired in between? Well, you don't know, do you? Because that's a relative term. And so here where it says presently the fig tree withered away, it could have been instantaneously, or it could have been the next day. That'd still be presently. And so that's not, you don't have to force a contradiction there. Would you agree, JD?
Yeah, I totally agree. And, you know, if you just took what happened here in bullet points, there's three things that happened. Jesus cursed the fig tree withered, and the disciples saw it. That happens in both passages.
Yeah, both counts. That's exactly right. And so the question is the time factor. Clearly, Mark is saying he cursed it one day, they saw it withered the next day. Matthew just says presently it withered and his disciples saw it. There's no way that anybody could pin down how long that presently represents. And so it's not a contradiction. Eric?
Is it verse 19 that says presently?
Yeah, in the King James Version.
The New King James says immediately.
It says immediately. Well,
But that's possible.
that's still possible. It's still possible that it happened immediately, and the disciples observed it, asked about it the next day.
The New American Standard says it once.
At once, okay. I still don't think that we've got a problem, an issue of a contradiction there, because Mark is saying that the disciples observed and questioned him about it the next day. However long, King James says presently, even if it was at once or immediately, that does not, notice verse 20 of Matthew says, when the disciples saw it. Well, when did they see it? According to Mark, they saw it the next day, right? So I'm just saying you can't pinpoint the time factor in Matthew. Mark, yes. Matthew, no. Therefore, you can't say it's contradictory. Wait.
So is the question about when the fig tree withered, or the question about when the disciples saw it?
It's both. When did it happen, and when did the disciples see it and comment about it? Mark makes it plain that they saw it and commented about it the next day. The question is, did it wither the first day, or in between the first day and the second day, or immediately? But you guys are saying, my version says presently the fig tree withered away. Your guys' newer versions are saying immediately or instantaneously. But still, the question is, when did it happen? When did the disciples see it and ask about it? And Matthew, you just can't hard fix the time factor in those events as they try to, as JD said. He cursed it, it withered, his disciples saw it and commented about it. That happened in Matthew's account, but you can't put your finger on when each event happened. Mark's count does. Thomas.
I was going to say, one thing you have to remember is that there's two different writers here, and it's two different perspectives of it. It doesn't mean necessarily that one is wrong or it's contradictory in each other, just the way that they kind of interpreted it at the time.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, but I don't know that would solve the if a skeptic wants to say it's a contradiction. Like you say, Matthew's not worrying about the time factor. Mark is more specific about the time factor. So it's two different ways of describing the same event. To a skeptic who wants to find a contradiction, that may not satisfy. But I think the way we have to answer it is, Matthew's just doesn't pin down the time factor.
well, I was going to go back off of your point on the discount. When I first saw the discount, it was immediately, oh, that was the discount. But from my friend's perspective, it was when I saw it. I mean, he uses that same phrase, when I saw it, it was withered.
Yeah.
And so it's just kind of the different perspective when they saw it. It could have been Mark saw it later,
Yeah, I think that's
That's
right.
why I think.
I think that's right. Wait.
Mark doesn't pin down the time factor, because it says in 13.
In 12, it says, on the morrow when they were come from Bethany, he was hungry.
Yeah.
All right, now then skip down to verse 20, and in the morning as they passed by. So it was the next morning.
Yeah, but it doesn't say when it withered, though. So
That's right.
in 13 it says, spotting in the distance the fig tree, he went and said if you could find anything on it. He came up to it and he found nothing on it, for it was a fig. In 14 it says, may no one ever eat fruit from you again. But it doesn't say it withered right then or it withered the next day.
No,
All we know is that the next day they saw it and said, hey.
That's
So
right.
it could've-
But if
it
you
could've
take
withered right then.
that bit of information and put it in with Matthew's account, it fits. It's not contradictory.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the main thing. All right, real quickly. So, is Jesus being unreasonable with the fig tree here? So, he in Mark's account, chapter 11, verse 13, seeing a fig tree afar off having leaves, he came, and if haply he might find anything there. And when he came to it, he found nothing but leaves, for the time of the figs was not yet. And so he's going to curse this fig tree when it's not even time for a fig tree to have figs yet? How unreasonable. What kind of a Savior have you got who could be that unreasonable with a tree? If he's that unreasonable with a tree, maybe he's unreasonable about a lot of other things too. Huh?
He's teaching his disciples a lesson.
He is teaching a lesson.
He said, this tree, even though it has seasons and bears fruit, you disciples, you don't have a season, you bear fruit all the time.
Okay? The importance of bearing fruit, I think, is certainly a lesson to be learned. So, but I think in regards to fig trees and the way that they bear fruit, typically, when the fig tree has leaves, if a fig tree has leaves, it has fruit. Right? That's typical. Apparently, this tree was showing leaves early. Because Mark's account definitely says that the time of the figs was not yet. It wasn't time for figs yet. If it wasn't time for figs yet, it really wasn't even time for fig trees to have leaves yet. This fig tree was showing leaves early. And Jesus, so if it's got leaves, it should have fruit. Because fig trees with leaves also have fruit. And so when he comes, it has leaves. There's the expectation it should have fruit. And it does not. And so, again, as Gordon said, he's using it as an object lesson, clearly. But it's not unreasonable. What he did is not unreasonable. You see a fig tree with leaves on it. A fig tree with leaves on it should have fruit. That's the way it works. This tree had leaves, apparently showing leaves earlier than normal, but no fruit. That was the problem. Fruit bearing is the point, but he's not being unreasonable in regards to this specific tree. Wayne? Do you have a thought, Wayne? Do you have anything to add on that? I thought I saw your hand. Okay. So again, the point I would take away from that is I don't think that Jesus is acting impetuously or unreasonably. I think there's an explanation to that. Timothy.
Do you think this
Thomas.
is a showing of? Do you think this is a showing of anger from Jesus, that he was angry at the fig tree for not producing fruit?
I don't think I would call it anger. Now we know Jesus did get angry in Mark 3 verse 4. He got angry at those hypocrites who were accusing him. So it's not beyond Jesus to get angry when it's deserved. I don't think he's being angry. I go back to what Gordon said. I think he's using this as an object lesson. When the time that you ought to be bearing fruit, you ought to be bearing fruit. And if you're not, there's a problem. And so I think that's the lesson he was trying to convey to them.
Do you think it would have been wrong for him to get angry at the fig tree right here, though? Even if he
I
did?
don't know. I don't know what it said. I wouldn't use the word anger here. He's using an object as an object lesson. But I don't think he's being unreasonable, and I don't think this is an angry reaction. I think he's just using this as a point to his disciples. JD?
Yeah, and I think that piece of information that you shared, I mean, obviously I'm not real up on my fig trees and, what seasons they're in and how they do. But I think that piece of information you told us is pretty important, because I think it's something that the disciples would have known too. And so I think that it just screams that it was an object for a lesson to be taught. And I think that would have been pretty apparent to them too, that, wow, it's really odd that fig tree has leaves but doesn't have fruit, even though it's a little early in the season.
Yeah. And, a lot of points can be and have been made about it. So we're to bear fruit too. How do we look? Well, it looks like we ought to be bearing fruit. And if we're not, there's a problem with that. Right? So I think it is a valuable object lesson. And again, it was a miracle. Jesus could speak and the tree withers from it. I think, Mark's account in 11:20 says it was dried up from the roots. A tree, if a tree dies, so let's say that it's infected with a disease or an insect or infestation or something, and it starts to die. Trees don't die overnight. It takes a while. And this tree dried up from its roots overnight. It was a miracle. And the disciples recognized that, and they asked about it. And Jesus says, you can do greater things than this if you have faith. So it was clearly a miracle. JD?
Yeah, the last thing I'd point out too is, I really don't think Jesus could be displayed some kind of anger here, because if he was just truly hungry and wanted a fig instead of, striking the tree to make it wither, he would have just made a fig appear and he would have eaten it.
Yeah.
Going on about it.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought about that. If he wants figs, he produced enough food to feed thousands of people with just this much. He could have provided food for himself if he wanted. He was using this as a lesson. Good point. All right.
The other thing is, he saw it far off, and that anticipation, and he took the effort to go up to it because the anticipation would be food there. What was the effort? He was hungry. The indication was that it was supposed to have fruit. It didn't. So, you know, he's done things like that before about, you know, other things about not producing things. Look at the, you know, we talked about the men with the talents, the one that took his talent and didn't do anything with it. He punished him. He gave it back to him. So here, there was an anticipation of something happened, and it wasn't producing what it was supposed to produce.
Yeah, you use the word anticipation, or maybe we could use the word expectation.
Yeah.
You know, that when there's an expectation, when the Lord has an expectation, and we're not achieving what He expects from us, then that's the issue. All right, let's go to real quickly before we run out of time. Let's go to the last episode. So, Luke, let's read. This is recorded in all four gospel accounts. It's when one of Jesus' disciples cut off the ear of the high priest's servant. But only in Luke does it mention that a miracle followed after that. Luke 22. Luke 22, verse 49. When they which were about him saw skip up to, we'll go back to 46. While he yet spake, behold, a multitude, and he that was called Judas, one of the 12, went before them and drew near unto Jesus to kiss him. But Jesus said unto him, Judas, betrayest thou the Son of Man with a kiss? When they which were about him saw what would follow, they said to him, Lord, shall we smite with the sword? So his own disciples said, should we fight? Should we smite with the sword? And one of them smote the servant of the high priest and cut off his right ear. And Jesus answered and said, Suffer ye thus far? And he touched his ear and healed him. Then Jesus said to the chief priests and captains of the temple and the elders which were come to him, Be ye come out as against a thief with swords and staves? When I was daily with you in the temple, ye stretched forth no hands against me. But this is your hour and the power of darkness. Then took they him and led him and brought him to the high priest's house. So, you know, one of the things that I think we always want to think about when it comes to Jesus and his sacrificial death on the cross on our behalf is he did that. First of all, he knew full well what was coming. He did nothing to prevent it from happening. He could have just run away. Or he could have asked his disciples to fight. In fact, here his disciples said, should we take up our swords? And he said no. He could have worked miracles to avoid them taking him. He didn't. He said he could call down angels to deliver him. And he didn't. There was just a whole array of things that Jesus could have done to prevent himself being taken. And he didn't do any of them. And this is one of them I think is worth noting. He even said to Pilate in John 18, my kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then would my disciples fight. They're not fighting. I told them not to fight. Right? My kingdom's not of this world. So, anyway, what I think is so amazing, just skipping ahead to the last question, the reaction to this miracle. So Jesus, verse 51, touched his ear and healed him. His ear was cut off. And Jesus healed him. You know what the most amazing thing here is? Verse 54. Then they took him and led him and brought him back. I'm going to tell you, if I'm one of those guys who came to arrest Jesus and I just saw that, I'm going to say, oh wait, no way. I'm not getting into that. I'm not dealing with that. Did you see what that guy just did? That guy's ear was off. And he touched him and restored it. I'm not arresting that guy. I'm not taking him to the high priest. I'm out of here, guys. You do what you want to do, but I'm not participating. That's amazing. That's unbelievable. I think one of the most, if not the most amazing thing about that story is that they went ahead and arrested him after observing that miracle. JD?
Yeah, I was going to make a similar point. I was going to say that this always reminds me of the rich man and Lazarus, and the rich man wanting them to send back Lazarus to talk to his brothers, and you know, even if somebody raised from the dead, if they wouldn't believe Moses and the prophets, they're not going to believe somebody if they were raised from the dead. And this is further proof of that. That if these guys would go through with that after what they just saw,
Amazing. I mean, John chapter 18. Skip over to John 18. John, the other accounts don't say who that was, who pulled the sword and cut off the high priest's ear. But John's account does say so in John 18. John 18, verse 10. When Simon Peter having a sword, then Simon Peter having a sword drew it and smote the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. Then said Jesus to Peter, put up thy sword into its sheath. The cup which my Father hath given me, shall I not drink it? So John gives us a couple bits of additional information. It was Peter who did this. That sort of goes to the impression that we often have of Peter sort of being impulsive, reactionary. You know, I don't know that I think that it's totally unreasonable, but he's the only one who did it. None of the other disciples did anything similar to what he did. He's quick to react, and so sometimes we refer to him as being impulsive. This may help lend to that impression of his character that we have. The high priest's servant's name was Malchus. Again, now we're talking about our lessons, and that was entitled Some Final Miracles of Jesus. And so we're getting right near the end, right? This happens as they come to arrest him. But one of the points that I think to take away from this is what we were saying earlier. When they came to take Jesus, he did not have to go. There was all kinds of things that he could have done to prevented himself from being arrested. Very simply, he could have just ran away and hidden. Certainly, he could have called upon his disciples to fight, and Jesus was still immensely popular among the common people. Remember, it was this week in Jerusalem when they had welcomed Jesus into the city as a returning conquering general from a war. They cut down the palm limbs and lined the way, took some of their own coats and lined the way. That's what they would do to a returning war hero who's bringing his troops back from a victory. Jesus was immensely popular among the common people, always was. That's why the Jewish rulers had to put on this mock trial during the dark hours of the night, and they had him on the cross by 9 o'clock the next morning before people knew what was happening. I think Jesus could have assembled a revolutionary army at a simple call. All he would have had to do is say the word. I think he could have assembled a great army. He didn't do it. My kingdom is not of this world, John 18. If my kingdom were of this world, then my disciples fight. Notice there, that's in John 18, verse 36. My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then would my servants fight, that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now is my kingdom not from thence. Or not from hence, rather. So again, Jesus said, I could get an army together, but I didn't. So he could have run away. He could have assembled an army. He could have called down angels. He said he had that power. He obviously still possesses miracle working power. He just restored the ear of Malchus. He still has miracle working power. But he didn't do any of that. And he let them take him, spit on him, slap him, taunt him, humiliate him, and then lie about him so they could get him on the cross. He didn't, as a sheep is dumb before his shearers, so opened he not his mouth. He didn't even make a verbal defense to avoid his crucifixion. Jesus voluntarily laid his life down. And I think that's, to me, one of the very impressive things about what happened there in the Garden of Gethsemane. J.D.?
I think one further point about, the Jewish leaders were so either blinded by unbelief or just hatred of, Jesus' popularity. But as we were just saying that, they saw this incredible miracle right in front of them and it didn't change course. But yet you have somebody like a Roman soldier who we presume knew little to nothing about, Jesus or even, the Jewish religion or anything. He saw the events transpire on the cross and he said, truly this must have been the Son of God.
Yeah.
Because He couldn't deny what his eyes saw.
So what you're saying is, to an unbiased eye, the conclusion is obvious.
Yes.
You have to be blinded by prejudice and hatred and envy and jealousy in order to disregard the proofs that are all around. Wait.
In the apostles' eyes, they were saying they're taking away our master. They're taking away Jesus. And we don't want this to happen. They still did not have a clue what was the events that was fixing to aspire. And Jesus had given them hints all along, but they still had no idea what was going on. Jesus knew exactly what was fixing to happen, and he knew that he didn't need anything to get in the way. And that's what's happened when he cut off his ears. That could have, just like you said, that could have stopped the events. He knew that had to continue on. So that's why he did that, and that's why he shunned, or that's why he, made such a big deal about it to them.
Yeah.
And they still didn't understand.
Yeah, exactly right. Tom?
This group that came out wasn't a small group. They just didn't come out with a few soldiers. And Peter did that. That was an act of aggression. And Jesus basically, by, fueling the ear, sort of diffused the problem. Otherwise,
Peter's in a mixed up state. Because remember, he said, if I have to die with you, I'll die with you. I'll never forsake you. I'll never deny you. And here he kind of proves that he would have done that. Because if we're going to go with swords now, you're outnumbered, and these guys are pros and you're not, and you're probably going to die right here on the spot. But he was willing at that point. Now his faith wavered when he followed Jesus from afar and denied him 3 times, like Jesus predicted. But Peter's faith is under a strong test here. There's just no doubt about it.
but he's also, I think, he was, Jesus knew that he was not going to lose any of those except Judas that was going to betray him.
Yeah.
So, if they come in and Peter did this, and, then the others would have reacted as well, and there'd been a confrontation, there would have been a good chance that some of his disciples, maybe Christ himself, would have been, executed right there at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, if it comes to a sword fight, Jesus might have got killed right there in the Garden of Gethsemane, and all of his disciples with him. I never thought about that, but that's true. This is not where we're going to fight this. Yeah,
And that's not what's supposed to happen.
yeah, that's right.
So, he diffused the situation and moved on. And it's almost like his overall group didn't even recognize that happened.
But at least Malchus knew what happened. You think Malchus was, hey guys, this is crazy. Let's get out of here. All right. So next week, Lord willing, what we'll do is we're gonna spend our time looking at the proofs that New Testament miracles, though real, are not happening in the world today. We'll review that. It'll be sort of the wrap up of our study. I thought it'd be worth us going through those arguments, refreshing our minds about those arguments, since we have said over and over again in our study of the miracles of Jesus that we don't believe that such miracles are happening today. So we'll talk about that next week. Thanks, everybody.